Hi, everyone. My name is Tatiana Batson, and I am the co-founder of the Diversity Club Same Hate Different Time.
And I'm Hazel Smith Foley, and I'm president of Women's Studies on campus. Together, Tati and I both serve as the two elected student representatives on the Student Diversity Leadership Board, where we both run the Diversity Club and represent the Ranney student body when addressing issues of diversity with the faculty and board diversity committees. This year, Women's Studies and Same Hate Different Time are joining for the first time to reimagine the traditional V-Day performances, which we usually present in a town hall meeting each February. We are so excited to introduce our first ever virtual presentation of Voices, the voices of women of color through a global lens.
Voices seeks to unify the vision of ending violence against women, cis and trans, and non-binary and gender-fluid people across the world with the goal of using art to embody and inspire solidarity. The term intersectional feminism can be explained as a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and intensify each other. All inequality is not created equal, and taking an intersectional approach shows the way that people's social identities can overlap, creating compounding experiences of discrimination.
We tend to talk about race inequality as separate from inequality based on gender, class, sexuality, or immigrant status. What's often missing is how some people are subject to all of these, and the experience is not just the sum of its parts. Our goal with this Voices presentation is to educate our community on issues of intersectional feminism and the ways in which it centers the voices of those experiencing overlapping concurrent forms of oppression in order to understand the depths of the inequalities and the relationships among them in any given context.
And with that, we are excited to invite you all to the first ever Voices presentation, created together by Women's Studies and Same Hate Different Time. Thank you. We hope you enjoy.
Broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round. You can find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out and move mountains, yeah. We gon' walk it out and move. And I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, high like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you. The silence seems too quiet, and it feels like it's getting harder to breathe. You know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet and move mountains. We'll bring it to its feet and move mountains. And I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, all we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other. We will rise, we will rise, we'll rise. Oh, we'll
I'll be reading a poem called My Black is Beautiful. From the color of my skin, to the texture of my hair, to the length of my strands, to the breadth of my smile, to the stride of my gait, to the span of my arms, to the depth of my bosom, to the curve of my hips, to the glow of my skin, my black is beautiful. It cannot be denied, it will not be contained, and only I will define it. For when I look in my mirror, my very soul cries out, my black is beautiful. And so today, I speak it out loud, unabashedly, I declare it anew. My black is beautiful. Whether celebrated, imitated, exploited, or denigrated, whether natural from inside or skillfully applied, my black is beautiful. To my daughters, my sisters, my nieces, my cousins, my colleagues, and my friends, I speak for all of us when I say it again. My black is beautiful.
Hello, my name is Yinka. I'm going to read a poem called First Generation by Ijoma Umobinio. And here goes. Here's to the security guards who maybe had a degree in another land. Here's to the manicurist who had to leave her family to come here, painting the nails, scrubbing the feet of strangers. Here's to the janitors who don't even understand English, yet work hard despite it all. Here's to the fast food workers who work hard to see their families smile. Here's to the laundryman at the Marriott who told me with a sparkle in his eyes how he was an engineer in Peru. Here's to the bus driver, the Turkish Sufi, who almost danced when I quoted Rumi. Here's to the harvesters who live in fear of being deported for coming here to open the road for their future generation. Here's to the taxi drivers from Nigeria, Ghana, Egypt, and India who gossip among themselves. Here's to them waking up at 4 a.m., calling home to hear the voices of their loved ones. Here's to their children, to the children who despite it all become artists, writers, teachers, doctors, lawyers, activists, and rebels. Here's to Western Union and MoneyGram for never forgetting home. Here's to their children who carry the heartbeats of their motherland and even in sleep speak with pride about their fathers. Keep on. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Dion and I am a corporate leader for a Fortune 200 financial services company, and today I wanted to share my experience being in the corporate world, being a woman of color, and some of what I have experienced. Now, earlier in my career, I noticed that there are inequities between being a Black woman and being a white woman. I would notice this when my white counterparts would get promoted before I would. And then, didn't really think much of it then because I just figured they were probably smarter than me. They probably did better work than I did. And then it started to happen more and I actually took notice. But not only was I experiencing that, my friends in other corporate roles in other companies were also experiencing the same thing. And that's when we became aware that this inequity is real, and what would you do? What can you do about it? Now, I eventually got promoted in a role to manager, I was the third Black woman in the history of that department to have held that position. But the minute I wanted to get more, I wanted to become an appointed officer in that department. And that just wasn't happening for me at all, no matter what I did. However, my white counterparts were getting promoted to officer level. I had to seek out a mentor, and that mentor really helped me. That mentorship relationship actually turned into a sponsorship relationship. And that way, when an opportunity came into another area, my sponsor was able to have a seat at the table and speak about me. And that way, I was able to get a position in another department at the officer level. But without that sponsorship relationship, I would not have been able to do that. Since then, I have immersed myself into helping other women. I have been lead in our employee resource groups in our companies, and I find that I have to reach down and help the other Black women that are there who are probably going through what I went through. And what I learned is that once you have achieved some amount of success, we have a responsibility to help other women. We have a responsibility to pull them up. And so today I spent much of my time mentoring and coaching women of color and helping them advance in the corporate world. I hope this has been helpful to you.
Hello, my name is LaBria Rainey, and I'm from South Carolina. And my experiences, specifically at PWI, race-wise, was very emotionally and mentally traumatic at a lot of times, especially being at one since elementary school up until now. I had to face a lot of criticism because of my race, and it kind of messed with my self-esteem. And on top of that, I had learning disabilities. I had speech disability, and people were telling me that I was dumb, and it's my skin color, that's why I'm so dumb, and I will never get nowhere in life. But I had to get through it because I knew that at other schools, they didn't have as many resources.
Hey all. My name's Tracy. I've been asked to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a woman of color in my experience. So I just want to explain, I'm actually interracial. My mom is white, my dad's Black. But according to the one drop rule, which I'm sure you'll learn about in school, I'm considered Black. Even though I'm really fair, extra fair right now, actually. So I guess what I'd like to say is being interracial is really just about being different. I'm sure everyone can relate to that very simple concept where you may have some things in common with people, but you kind of don't necessarily feel like you're on the same team. So that's what it was like for me growing up, first in a community that was mostly Black, and then in my later years in my adulthood being around mostly white people. You just feel a little different, but that's not bad. It actually is incredibly useful sometimes because you are able to understand where people different than you are coming from, and also how to reach them. So you become quite adept at learning how to interact with all different kinds of people because of your practice. And that's what I would say, basically. Everybody in their life is gonna have a time when they feel super different than the people around them. It's fine. It's good to sort of have that discomfort and maybe even get used to it because it makes you more empathetic. So what I hope you take away from this very, very short talk is that in life, you have opportunities to make things easier for people or make things harder for people. And some of those people may be different than you or appear different than you. Just make life easier when you can. That's all it really takes to be a good person, and also to make the world better. That is an incredible simplification of policy and behavior that we see playing out all around us now on a global stage, but really it just comes down to treating people like people that you recognize you have more in common with than difference. So anyway, thank you for listening to this, and I wish you all very well. Take care.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room, just like moons and like suns with the certainty of the tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head, lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history, shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Still I Rise by Maya Angelou.
Black women. Marsha P. Johnson. Johnson was a black transgender woman and activist most known for her involvement with the Stonewall Inn riots, a 1969 uprising against police brutality by New York City's LGBTQ+ community. At the time, it was illegal to serve openly LGBTQ+ people alcohol or for them to dance with one another. Johnson went on to become a prominent voice in the fight for LGBTQ+ equality and was an activist during the 1980s AIDS epidemic. The wage gap. Intersectional discrimination perpetuates the racial and gender wealth gaps, limits black women's access to educational opportunities, and impedes their career advancement. This explains why black women's earnings are so far behind those of both white men and white women. According to the U.S. Census, on average, black women were paid 63% of what non-Hispanic white men were paid in 2019. That means it takes the typical black woman 19 months to be paid what the average white man takes home in 12 months. Hair. Bans or restrictions on natural hair or hairstyles associated with black people are often rooted in white standards of appearance and perpetuate racist stereotypes that black hairstyles are unprofessional. Such policies exacerbate anti-black bias in employment, at school, while playing sports, and in other areas of daily living. The Crown Act. People should not be forced to divest themselves of their racial cultural identity by changing their natural hair in order to adapt to predominantly white spaces in the workplace or in school. The Crown Act was created in 2019 by Dove and the Crown Coalition to ensure protection against discrimination based on race-based hairstyles by extending statutory protection to hair texture and protective styles such as braids, locks, and twists in the workplace and in public schools. Colorism. Colorism roots from the belief of white supremacy. Being white is seen as civil, rational, beautiful, and superior, while having a darker skin tone is seen as the exact opposite: savagery, irrational, ugly, and inferior.
Ong. My name is Lily Aspen, and I belong to the Ninilchik tribe, which is part of the Raven clan. Ninilchik belongs to the Unangantunu people, otherwise known as the Aleut. I will be performing To Those Who Bullied Me by internationally renowned Inuk throat singer Tanya Tagak Gillis. Today is Pink Shirt Day at my daughter Naia's school. All the kids wore pink to send the message that bullying will be tolerated. I'm happy that bullying has a negative social stigma these days. It wasn't like that when I was a kid growing up in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut. But today, I would personally like to thank everyone who bullied me as a child. I used to come home with frozen phlegm in my hair from being spit on. I was scared every day at recess and after school. I would get kicked, slapped, shoved, punched, berated, and put down. I thank all of you who tormented me for teaching me resilience and that the world is not an easy place. Later in life, I came to understand and feel compassion for those who have a hard life and think the only solution is to take it out on others. You also taught me not to care what other people thought of me. Without you, my childhood bullies, I would have been bullied into stopping singing by haters. Many tried to make me feel shame for what comes from my heart. Again, thank you, bullies. Because of you, I am strong. I trace the lines of his body, and he leans over and kisses my cheek. I have once again achieved that look in his eye, like a hunger that has finally been fulfilled. Then, leaving the bills rolled up and bound with elastic, he puts on his suit and tie and leaves. My name is Evangeline, and I'm 24 years old. I haven't been blessed with the wits to go to college, get a job, and assimilate into the white world as they had planned for me to do. No. I've been blessed with a beautiful body, though. The only thing I've learned to use in order to get my next meal. Maybe I did have a good working brain once. I mean, I'll never know. I haven't seen my real friends and family since I was being driven away in the back of an old truck, bumping and rolling its way to my hell. Confined in a white building with dull walls, dull, tasteless food, and dull classrooms with the bold letters looking unto Jesus across the top of every blackboard, I realized that I had lost everything I once known. I think I could have managed if I wasn't scrutinized for speaking the only words I knew. If I didn't have to sleep with one eye open, hoping the man in the white robe didn't pick me at nighttime. If I didn't have to walk with my head down, shamed for being the color I am. When I got out, it was no better. My life dragged on. I was a bottom feeder of society. I still had to walk with my head down in daytime, because if I did happen to look up, there was always that one person that gave me that look to put me back in my place. That's when I learned that as the night wore on and the beer rounds got higher and higher, the color of my skin didn't matter anymore. So I would pick one, give them what they wanted, and in return they gave me what I needed. So here I am now, catching a bite to eat and keeping to the shadows in the daytime. When night comes, I pick my next prey. Tonight, it's a Friday. They'll be generous with the cash. First things first, I need a new outfit. I see a woman about my size walking out of a high-end fashion store, a large box containing what must be some kind of boots in her right hand and a bag of clothes in her left. I walk right behind her and wait for her to look to her right. Then I snatch the first thing I can out of the bag before blending back into the crowd. I get to the public bathroom in the subway and I realize I've struck gold. I slip on the dress, a tight, bold purple material covered with sequins, stopping about 5 inches above the knee. It accents all the right parts and complements my copper skin. I open my purse, which carries everything I own, and pull out the usual. Lipstick, mascara, eyeliner, blush, shadow, and some stolen perfume. My hand brushes something at the bottom of the purse, and I take it out. A necklace with a small wooden bear that my father carved for me. McCoons, meaning Little Bear. It was my name before they took me to the residential school, where they changed it to Evangeline. The necklace was the only thing from my past that I managed to keep hidden, the only thing that reminds me of my home, of who I am, or who I was. The moon takes its place, the neon signs color the city, and my hunt begins. I choose a bar and immediately find him. Hair ruffled from him constantly running through it in frustration, tie loosened, slouched, a disappointed scowl on his face. I watch as he orders a few strong shots. The first couple he takes stiffly, grimacing at his fire. Then his shoulders start to relax a bit more after the 5th or 6th. That's my cue. I slide into the stool on his left, leaning forward and giving him an innocent smile. I make small talk, and he starts to tell me about the issues with work and how he's caught his wife cheating. I answer with an empathetic look and reassuring words as he knocks back a few more shots. When his head starts to sway and he looks at me in a bolder manner, I make my next move. I whisper in his ear and he nods, giving me a hungry look. He says to name the price. I raise it on Fridays, but that's okay with him. I hop into the passenger seat of his red Corvette and he takes us to his hotel. The next morning, I wake before him, slipping into the shower and letting a few tears get washed away down the drain. That's the only place they ever go, down the drain. I didn't choose this life. They chose it for me. This is all I know. I dry off and slip back in beside him. Soon after, he wakes up and smiles down at me. I trace the lines of his body, and he leans over and kisses my cheek. I have once again achieved that look in his eye, like a hunger that has finally been fulfilled. Then, leaving the bills rolled up and bound with elastic, he puts on his suit and tie and leaves. Kagasakuk. Thank you. Native American women, on average, are paid approximately 60 cents for every dollar earned by white, non-Hispanic men. Women from some tribes earn less than 50% of what their white male peers make. In order to earn the same amount white men earned the previous calendar year, the average Native American woman has to work 10 additional months into the new year before equal pay is reached on October 1st. Over the course of a 40-year career, the loss in pay adds up to nearly $1 million. This equals $24,656 in lost wages per year and $2,055 in lost wages per month. More than 4 in 5 American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. More than half of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. More than half of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced physical violence by intimate partners in their lifetime. Almost half of American Indian and Alaska Native women have been stalked in their lifetime. American Indian and Alaska Native women are 1.7 times more likely than white women to have experienced violence in the past year. Native women also face murder rates 10 times the national average in some counties. There have been 4 Native Americans in the U.S. Senate and a handful of indigenous U.S. representatives. All were men until Haaland and Davids were elected in 2018. Native American women are more than 2.5 times more likely to experience sexual violence than any other ethnicity. 56.1% of American Indian or Alaska Native women had experienced sexual violence at one point in their lifetime, and 14.4% experienced sexual violence the year preceding the survey.
This is Suzanne Norris writing about her experience with anti-Semitism. Although this isn't something I've personally experienced as a Jewish woman, I think it is very relatable to other Jewish girls who have experienced similar events. I am a practicing Jew, but was brought up in a non-traditional Jewish home. Judaism is an ethno-religion, which is as much about the religion as it is about being a part of an ethnicity. Being Jewish is a big part of who I am, and it shapes my views and my behaviors. As one of the only Jews in my school and college, I noticed the prevalence of the Holocaust jokes. My granddad was Polish and my grandma is German, and they escaped Nazi Germany. I don't have any extended family because they were killed in the Holocaust. Hearing people make a joke out of it or think it's funny is really hard. You feel totally powerless, upset, and angry, but often fear drawing more attention to yourself by speaking out. As a child, my father taught me to deflect anti-Semitism and rise above it. Over the years, this has become harder to do because of the smaller yet more nuanced forms of anti-Semitism I've faced. I've lost count of the amount of times I've had someone tell me, "You look Jewish," and I once told my mom I wanted a nose job, which fortunately I never had. I once dyed my hair blonder as I thought my natural curly dark hair made me look more Jewish. As a teenager who was already quite insecure about looks, I'm not sure people realize how offensive such comments can be. Fortunately, over time and with the support of family and friends, I've learned to embrace who I am. I increasingly feel more comfortable calling someone out for being offensive. I've lost count of the amount of times I've had someone tell me, "You look Jewish." That said, it's often hard to speak out in defense of your faith. A very good friend recently told me she wouldn't apply to a job because it was a Rothschild & Co. business, as she'd heard its founders controlled the world. Her comment made me realize how embedded anti-Semitism is in our society, and that much of it comes from a place of ignorance, not malice. I had the courage to flag the offense to her comment, and it caused her to explain it was a dangerous anti-Semitic trope. A lot of the issues with anti-Semitism stem from the people not knowing Jews. At university, I was often told I was the first Jew a person had met in their life. People need to talk to their Jewish friends, ask Jewish people how to be better allies, and continue sharing content on social media about anti-Semitism in all its forms in order to eradicate anti-Semitism for good. Thank you. Jewish woman, one of the strongest and most resilient group of women. There are over 20 ethnic Jewish groups, Ashkenazi and Sephardic being the most common ones. reproductive, and general health. 1 in 40 Ashkenazi Jewish women has a BRCA gene mutation. Mutations in BRCA genes raise a person's risk for getting breast cancer at a young age, and also for getting an ovarian and other cancers, making Jewish women, specifically Ashkenazi, at higher risk. Economic opportunity. 43% of Jewish women in the United States who are in the workforce have suffered from discrimination and economic disadvantage. Poverty in North America falls disproportionately upon women, specifically those of Jewish backgrounds. The Jewish women in the U.S. workforce are some of the sole supporters of more than 9 million families. Political agency. Florence Prague Kahn was the first Jewish woman to serve in Congress in 1920. Bella Abzug helped initiate the Women's Strike for Peace in 1961. In Congress, she fought specifically for Jewish women's environmental and human rights. Anti-Semitism towards Jewish women. Jews make up only 3% of America, yet are one of the most discriminated against groups. Almost all Jewish women experience anti-Semitism once in their lives. How you can take action. Take action by educating yourself and urging your community to get involved in addressing anti-Semitism towards women. If you see anti-Semitism being expressed in front of you, say something about it. Be an advocator, not a bystander. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pooja Samuel. I am an executive director at JPMorgan Chase, where I lead a group called Area X Ideation for the Corporate and Investment Bank. My role involves working with my business colleagues in thinking through what the future state of their business looks like. And then together we'll work on generating ideas in specific spaces and launching hopefully new product concepts. So I've been in financial services a majority of my career. And as I reflect on what it's been like to be a woman of color within this industry, I think about the times where, it's definitely been difficult. It's been lonely at times. And as a result, I think that there's just generally a lack of support within the system for women of color in this space. For those not as familiar with capital markets, it's predominantly been a white male dominated industry. I've definitely found it a personal struggle of mine to balance a traditional role with modern day capabilities, right? Sometimes being of a certain race or gender fosters this unconscious or conscious bias in a person where when they're sitting across from you, they already have these preconceived notions. So I feel like it's always a constant struggle to prove yourself time and time again. But I am hopeful. I think, there are many people trying to close this gap, myself included, where, we're focused on raising awareness of this and raising opportunity levels for people who may not traditionally have them. And, as I think through the future, I do think that we will come close to a day where, we can even out that spread at the senior levels as well as within the industry.
My contribution is based on my experiences here as an immigrant, and my focus is on hope for all of us. Citizens, immigrants, legal aliens, minorities, naturalized citizens, visitors, expatriates. What America means to us, this country where we were born, or where we came, or were brought to. I became an American citizen after 9/11, when I had been here about 15 years, and the attack made me realize how much I loved this country, that I finally felt ready to commit, to give up my citizenship and become part of this country. I wanted to vote, I wanted to be part of the people, I wanted to be part of the country. Well, as they say, America is an ideal, an experiment that is being tested and explored in every generation. It has its ups and downs. It has an uplifting history about freedom and the pursuit of happiness and democracy. But it has an equally dark history about slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow, McCarthyism. So what should we dwell on? My focus, as I said, is on hope, on renewed beginnings. And I think my good fortune has been to be here when we voted in our first Black president. Who would have thought that possible? Well, there's so much I want to say, but I can't articulate it too well. As you can see, I get quite emotional. So I've decided to turn to a song that captures it best for me and that I'd like to share with you. The hope, the struggles, the desire to be one with everyone, be part of this land and belong is captured hauntingly, I think, in a song called This Land Is Your Land. It was originally written by Woody Guthrie. There have been some very famous versions by Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Johnny Cash. My favorite version for many, many years was Bruce's after 9/11. He sang it so beautifully and just made us all feel that we would do anything for this country. Well, it was overtaken by another version that I heard 2 years ago by Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. It's just overtaken that version for me. The way she sings it, it mirrors my emotions and captures my feelings in a way and reflects my sentiments today. And well, I'd play a snippet for you, but I think I've run out of time.
Hi everyone, my name is Rusam, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm a sophomore here at Rani. This is my speech called Best of Both Worlds. The idea that being a first-generation Indian American can be confusing is quite the understatement. Growing up, I felt almost as if I lived two separate lives. At home, I was always inherently Indian. I had Indian food for dinner almost every day, said my prayers every morning and night, and celebrated every Indian festival with excitement and reverence. I loved being Indian, and I saw no harm in expressing this. However, this changed when kids at school teased me for bringing Indian food for lunch or for having a name that was difficult to pronounce. As a result, I tried quite hard to be American. Although I knew my classmates would never see me as truly American due to my brown skin, I tried so desperately to lose all the other things that made me different, just so that I could fall in line with a dominant culture that wasn't mine and did not need to be mine. I spoke, dressed, and acted like all my classmates, also that I could fit in. As I was changing myself, I noticed that people started treating me differently. I would receive comments like, "You're too pretty to be Indian," or "Wow, for an Indian, you're not that bad." Not only did these comments offend me, but they confused me as well. Why was being a person of color not considered beautiful? In this quest to merge with American society, I began to lose sight of my Indian heritage and eventually struggled to find my place within either culture. My friends and family often teased me for being whitewashed since I tried so hard to be like my American classmates. This left me feeling neither Indian enough nor American enough, and consequently quite confused about my identity. My identity is more complex than just being brown. There is more to me than the color of my skin. Growing up, my classmates always had perfect pin-straight hair. I would be bullied for my natural hair because it was curly and thick. I would also be ridiculed for having thicker eyebrows. I started growing more insecurities throughout the years because I felt like I never fit in. I started to spend lots of money on different hair products and treatments that were supposed to make my hair just like all the other white girls had. I would buy new types of makeup so that my brows looked like everyone else's. I would be told to stay out of the sun so that my skin did not become any darker. I was a fool by listening to all of the comments said to me. However, over time, I realized that I don't need to fix my so-called imperfections to fit in. My hair is a part of me and a part of who I am. My skin color is a part of me and a part of who I am. Now every girl wants their hair to be wavy and their skin to be tan. Almost every person I meet tells me I have the nicest eyebrows they've ever seen. Where was this energy when I was growing up? I had made an error in naively assuming that assimilating into American culture would give me a sense of identity. The truth is, being American simply did not fit me. On the other hand, I could never be fully Indian either, given that I was raised and schooled in a predominantly white area. In retrospect, as much as I desperately wanted to identify myself with one culture or the other, I now see that I never needed to. I am Indian and I am American. I am an Indian American young woman, and I am proud of both of my identities, as well as the fact that I've had the opportunity to be raised amidst two unique cultures. In fact, it is the blending of these two cultures that make me who I am. I might wear ripped jeans and sweatshirts every day, but a good portion of my closet is full of traditional Indian clothing. I might not always speak Hindi at home, but I can use it to express myself perfectly while on the phone with my grandparents across the world. I might not bring Indian food to school for lunch, but I can make and enjoy various Indian dishes on my own. Because of this, I now realize that my two worlds don't have to be separate, but can coexist as one instead. Thank you.
A girl between her 1st and 5th birthday in India and Pakistan has a 30 to 50% higher chance of dying than a boy. Between 2000 and 2019, female labor force participation rates declined by 9% in India, 2% in Bhutan, and 2% in Sri Lanka. Muthu Lakshmi Reddy was the first woman in South Asian countries appointed to the Legislative Council in 1926, first female student admitted to a men's college, first woman surgeon in the government hospital, and first woman deputy president of the Legislative Council. Kalpana Chawla was the first Indian woman to make it to space in 1962. In 1865, Anandibai Gopal Rao Joshi was the first Indian woman physician and the first woman to have graduated with a 2-year degree in Western medicine in the United States. In November 2020, Kamala Harris was the first person of South Asian descent elected to the vice presidency, representing the multiculturalism that defines America but is largely absent from Washington's power centers. South Asian women are paid 10 to 15% less than men after accounting for education and work experience. 16 to 55% of Asian women report experiencing physical and or sexual violence by an intimate partner during their lifetime.
Hi, my name is Christine Liao Young, and I am an Asian American professional that lives in the New York City area, and I've been living in New York since I was a child. And growing up in New York City, I knew I was a little bit different because I came from another country, but I didn't feel I was that different because of the diversity that the city has. And we have so many people from so many different backgrounds and different walks of life all living in the city. But I think about a year ago, I started sensing more and more anti-Asian sentiment around me and also in other parts of the US and actually around the world, mostly in Western countries. When the pandemic first broke out, people started associating Asian with the coronavirus because the virus originated in China. So they see Asian as people who are the virus carrier when most of us, including myself, haven't traveled to Asia at all for a number of years. People started avoiding places in our community like Chinatowns. They don't want to eat at those restaurants anymore. They don't want to shop there because they feel that that's where the virus would be. And so as the year progressed and as the pandemic progressed, we're seeing more and more hate crime against Asian, and that is very unfortunate. There's been so many incidents happening that are now starting to be reported in the news. You have incidents, for example, in Los Angeles, in Oakland, and there was one incident here in New York most recently where an Asian woman walked out of a bakery in Flushing, Queens, and then she was pushed down onto the floor and she cracked her head and had to get stitches in the hospital because someone just randomly, targeted her because she's Asian and attacked her. You also have heard probably or seen some news headlines about people, especially the elderly Asians, who are being pushed onto the subway tracks here in New York City, and it's very unfortunate. In the next clip, I put together some headlines of what's been happening in the Asian American community for the past year, and you will see some of the news headlines of attacks against Asians, as well as the community coming together and our government putting in new legislation to help combat anti-Asian crime. And so, my message for everyone is that, we're all here to fight the virus, but please also fight the bias as well that comes with the pandemic. Thank you.
In Asia and the Pacific, the proportion of women who reported having experienced physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime varies greatly by country. While it is 15% in Bhutan, Japan, Lao PDR, and the Philippines, the proportion reaches 68% in Kiribati and Papua New Guinea. A 2010 study by the UN Office of Drugs and Crime in Vietnam found that 58% of ever married women had experienced some form of domestic violence, although only 13% sought help from the justice system. In Cambodia, 20% of the women who experienced intimate partner violence reported that they had missed work and their children had missed school. A 2012 UN Office on Drugs and Crime report on human trafficking recorded more than 10,000 cases of trafficking persons in South Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific between 2007 and 2010. Most detected survivors of trafficking are female, and in Southeast Asia, more girls are detected than women. For example, in Thailand, 52% of detected women of trafficking in 2014 were underage girls. In the Philippines, the maternal death rate is 200 per 100,000, more than 20 times the rate in the U.S. Additionally, 1/3 of women in Vietnam receive no prenatal care. A high proportion of women report major barriers to accessing health services in Cambodia. In Myanmar, rape is the second most commonly reported serious crime after murder. In Malaysia, 11,400 children, 6,800 of whom were girls, below the age of 15 were married according to the population census in 2000. Child brides face higher risks of inter-partner violence, especially when the groom is much older.
My name is Roshan Khandahari, and this is a piece I wrote called Onions. When prompted with a question about my experiences as a woman of color, I had to ask myself, as I always do, whether I even am a woman of color. So I asked my friend Lev, who is black, what color am I? Definitely all shades of green, she said. I thought this a more accurate assessment of me than could ever have been derived from trying to determine my race. When people ask me, what are you? I usually call myself Iranian, though when I can tell they aren't used to hearing it pronounced that way, I say Persian. I frequently leave out the other, blander Eastern European half of me, though I won't deny that I am as stubborn a Slav woman as they come. The Persian people possess what Franklin Foer calls a Roman nose for self-preservation. But I think self-preservation is so inherently Persian, and we have such iconic noses, and it alliterates so nicely that it should henceforth be called a Persian nose for self-preservation, and that I do indeed have. No matter the challenges, Iranians, particularly Iranian women, persevere and excel. Though our history goes back to before the Persian Empire, the oppression of Persian women we seem to be so familiar with is actually only a recent development after too much interference from the West. Iranian women are often limited to the image of a sad, olive face shrouded in black, the objects of oppression, but the women of Iran are restless and gritty and never really accepted the restrictions placed on us by the Islamic Republic. We may wear headscarves, but it's a Persian trademark to pull out small pieces of hair in rebellion of Sharia law. We may have been limited to wearing black, but Persian women claimed that shit. We may have been banned from attending soccer games, but that didn't stop us from storming Azadi Stadium, sneaking in dressed as men. We never cease to surprise. We're layered, like onions. Thank you.
Middle Eastern women's participation in the workforce. Women's participation in the workforce is low. At 25%, the global average for women in the labor force is only about 50%. In the Middle East, though, it is half that, despite the fact that more and more women are becoming better educated than before. Now, only 17% of women work in the non-agricultural sector. Middle Eastern women in politics. Benazir Bhutto. Benazir Bhutto was a Pakistani politician who served as Prime Minister of Pakistan from 1988 to 1990, and again from 1993 to 1996. She was the first woman to head a democratic government in a Muslim-majority nation. Feminism in the Middle East. There are feminist organizations in Middle Eastern countries, but they tend to be small and lack significant input into the political processes. Using law reform as a tool of social engineering is where political leadership has judged that legal reforms in the status of women would promote the achievement of full modernization that reforms have been made. Education. Women in the Middle East have higher illiteracy rates compared to that of the rest of the world. Poverty plays a crucial role in the lack of women's education. The nation suffers from poverty because its population has a high illiteracy rate, and many are illiterate because they are unable to pay for school.
Hi, my name is Isabel Romero Vila, and I'm going to be reading a piece by Gabrielle Rivas that I feel captures what it is to be a white-passing Latina. As a white-passing Latina, it is difficult negotiating identity when myself and others are pushed away from the culture we identify with. With the belief Latinos all have darker skin, it is difficult to imagine a person with pale skin or lighter hair to identify as Latino. Phrases such as "what are you" or "where are you from" are common for any white passing to hear. Being passing means passing as a white person, usually without others noticing your ethnic background. I got the "you must be white" comment or the "your skin is too white to be Mexican." Even though being Latino does not mean brown, as a young child I hurt my feelings hearing these comments. Latino means coming from a country where Spanish is spoken, which should be all-encompassing. But when Googling Latino or Mexican, photos of people with dark skin and indigenous clothes make up most of the results. It was clear people were using the stereotype that Latinos have dark skin and are indigenous looking when they questioned my ethnicity. To others, feeling Mexican was wrong. Every time my parents or sisters went somewhere, someone looked at them and said, "They look Mexican, you look white." Sometimes I nervously laugh, but it's awkward when someone points it out. At times it's funny, but it got hurtful after a while. It was difficult for myself to imagine an ethnicity with a wide variety of shades because I felt I didn't fit into the same category as a person of color. I would think about how much easier it would be if I could just tan more, have a more Mexican name, and have curly hair like my sister. This is an issue amongst other Latinos, this feeling of having to prove their Latinidad to others because their appearances were too white. Despite feeling excluded from my own culture at times, it is important to admit the privilege that comes with being white passing. Since I look white, I've never and will not be followed into a store under suspicion I might be stealing. I am seen as less deviant and more desirable to men. It becomes easy to forget the struggle of immigration your own people have gone through when no one has ever asked if I am legal. I carry all the benefits of being white, and it becomes easy to fit in with my white peers, but I cannot deny the culture that helped me become the person I am. It's okay to admit the privilege I have as someone who appears to be white, but to also remember to embrace my true identity. Even though others might not consider myself to be Latino, it feels wrong to deny the only culture I've known and to forget the journey my ancestors went through to provide me with a comfortable life in the U.S. The more confident I have become in my own pale skin, recognizing my privilege and confronting ignorance, the more I've learned only I can diminish my identity by not claiming my Latinidad. Being Latina is my color. Thank you.
For the poet who told me rats aren't noble enough creatures for a poem, Elizabeth Acevedo. Because you are not the admired nightingale, because you are not the noble doe, because you are not the picturesque ermine armadillo or bats. They have been written, and I don't know their song the way I know you're scuttling between walls, the scent of your collapsed corpse rotting beneath floorboards, your frantic squeals as you pull at your own fur from glute traps, ripping flesh from skin in an attempt to survive. Because in July of '97, you birthed a legion. On 109th, swarm from behind dumpsters, made our streets infamous for something other than crack. Shit, we nicknamed you Cat Killer. Race with you through open hydrants. Screech with you when Siete blasted aluminum bats into your brethren's skull. The sound slapped down dominoes. You reigned that summer rat. And even when they sent exterminators, half dead and on fire, you pushed on. Because even though you are an inelegant, simple, mammal bottom feeder, always frickin' famished little ugly thing who feast on what crumbs fall from the corners of our mouths, you live uncuddled, can't be bought at Petco and fed to fat snakes because you are not the maze rat of labs. Pale, pretty-eyed, trained. You raise yourself, sharp fang, clawed scarred, patched dark. Because of this, they should love you. But look at the beast, the poet tells me. The table is already full, and rats, you are not a right-worthy thing. Every time they say that, take your gutter, take your dirt coat, filth this page, rat, scrape your underbelly against street concrete, you better squeak and raise the whole world, rat. Let loose a plague of words, rat, and remind them that you, that I, that we are worthy of every poem.
From Selena to Sylvia Rivera, Latinas have shown their strength, fortitude, and skill in every discipline and field, including science, the arts, law, and politics. In Latin America, women face many issues, including job disparities between men and women. In Latin America in 2018, only a little over half of the women in 18 countries held job positions. This is due to a lack of education, as the higher level of education a woman had, the more likely it was that she had a job. One key figure for Latina women is Ellen Ochoa, who on April 8, 1993 became the first Hispanic woman in the world to go into space. Another key figure to Latinas is Sylvia Mendez. Mendez and her family fought to integrate schools years before the Supreme Court case Brown v. Board of Education. Through Sylvia's efforts, she caused California to be the first state to desegregate schools in 1946. Other key figures for Latina women are the Mirabal sisters, who opposed Rafael Trujillo's dictatorship in the Dominican Republic. This opposition from the sisters caused them to eventually be assassinated, but they also became symbols of both popular and feminist resistance. The United Nations General Assembly even designated the 25th of November as the Elimination of Violence Against Women in their honor. The number of Latinas and Hispanics in the U.S. is growing, and in 2019, Hispanics and Latinas made up 18.6% of the women in the U.S. And in 2060, it is estimated that Latinas and Hispanics will make up about 30% of the female population in the U.S. And Latinas are very involved in business, since in the U.S., 1.5 million businesses are majority owned by Latinas. As of 2013, Latinas owned about 1 out of every 10 women-owned businesses. And Latina women own 36% of all companies owned by minority women in America. However, Latinas still face issues in economic security in the U.S., since Latina women make 55 cents to the dollar when compared to white non-Hispanic males. Also, Latina women only earn $549 per week compared with white women's median earnings of $718. Through all these difficulties, Latinas continue to be resilient, and in the words of Zoe Saldana, people think of Latina women as being fiery and fierce, which is usually true, but I think that the quality that so many Latinas possess is strength.